Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin and welcome to my channel. So I have a confession to make. I was gonna vlog myself reading Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol, which is why we're here today. But it turns out I'm not that great of a vlogger. I mean, hopefully I'll improve, but I just could not remember to take the camera out whenever I started to read this to get like B-roll, or I would just be like so into reading the book I didn't want to pause to talk to a camera. So that's something I'm gonna work on. I'm gonna work on that. But I still wanted to come on here and do a review for you guys because honestly, I don't see too much about this book. I see a lot of videos and podcasts about Gogol's short stories, The Overcoat and The Nose, which are phenomenal. I would highly recommend those if you want to get into reading Gogol. I'd also recommend The Portrait, which I don't think is talked about enough either. I'd also recommend his short story, Old World Landowners. I think that one's great too. But I don't see too much about Dead Souls, even though this is such a prominent classic in Russian literature. So I wanted to come on here and talk about it and hype it up, and hopefully more people will want to read this because I feel like it is very well known, but it's not talked about enough. Also, look at this vintage classics edition. It is so beautiful. I hope the binding is like focusing. But yeah, this book is gorgeous. I've wanted to read it for a while now, and I finally did, so I'm pretty proud of myself. So Dead Souls is a story of a man named Chichikov, and he shows up to this Russian town, which is pretty standard for a Gogol story. It's always someone coming to town. Chichikov comes to town and he starts befriending all the government officials. He starts befriending landowners, and he starts going to these landowners' estates and wanting to buy their dead souls. Now, what he means by this is peasants that have worked on these landowners' estates that have died. And the landowners, they're like, why would you want to buy dead souls, dead peasants? What are you going to get out of it? And that theme follows through most of volume 1 of this book, where you're trying to figure out Chichikov's motive for wanting to buy dead souls. And something that Gogol always does really well is he creates these really quirky but realistic characters. Every landowner that Chichikov meets has some quirk. For example, one of the landowners is this old woman. She's a widow, and she's very skeptical of Chichikov. The next is Nozdryov. I hope I'm like pronouncing some of these names right, because honestly, I don't know. They're Russian. I don't know. And then there's Nozdryov. He's a gambler. He's always lying and just adds and adds and adds to lies and spins stories. That's what he's known for in this town. And he doesn't understand Chichikov's motive, and he kind of fights Chichikov on it, but he goes along with the sale of the dead serfs anyway. Then there's another landowner who's just the most agreeable man that you will ever meet. And he loves Chichikov. Doesn't even bat an eye when Chichikov wants to buy his dead souls. There's also another landowner who just hates everyone. He has a problem with everyone. He's name-calling everyone, but he also goes along with the sale of the dead souls, even though it seems like he doesn't really want to. Chichikov goes to all of these landowners and he wants to buy their dead souls. Chichikov's super happy that all the paperwork went through. He bought the dead souls. He goes back to the inn where he's staying and he falls sick for 3 days. Within those 3 days, absolute hell breaks loose over this town. I think it was the woman, the old widow. She goes to one of the government officials' wives and kind of airs out her skepticism towards Chichikov and the deal. And then that government official's wife meets with another wife. They start gossiping. They start trying to figure out what Chichikov's motive is and starts to spin a whole entire story. This story gets passed through all the women in the town, all the men of the town. Chichikov, who was once admired in this town and loved by pretty much everyone, was now hated. Everyone, like, his reputation just got completely destroyed in a matter of 3 days, and he didn't even know. Like, he was sick. He did not leave the inn. So once he feels better, he's, getting ready for the day, excited to go visit his friends all around town. Nozdryov comes to the inn and starts telling Chichikov what happened. And Chichikov is like, what? Like, what the hell? What happened while I was sick? None of this is true. So then he starts to go visit his friends to clear his name, and they won't even see him. So at the end of volume 1, Chichikov decides his reputation is ruined in this town. He needs to get away. So him, his servants, they all leave. They hit the road and they're gone. So volume 2 is only 4 chapters, 4 complete chapters, and then 1 chapter that is kind of fragmented. So Gogol did not actually finish volume 2. He spent a lot of time writing, rewriting, burning his manuscripts, which I found really interesting because I admire Gogol so much as an author. And to know even he, who I admire so much, even he struggled with writing and telling his stories, that just made me, I don't know, it made me feel better about not being the best at everything. I won't lie. The first 3 chapters, which there are only 5 total chapters, were very dense. I didn't understand the point of some of his writing. So once volume 2 starts, we start following a man named Tentetnikov. And Gogol takes a lot of time explaining this character from childhood to adulthood. And, you begin to assume, okay, this is who Chichikov is gonna end up staying with. They're gonna meet and Chichikov's probably gonna become friends with him. And that is what happens. Then Chichikov meets one of Tentetnikov's neighbors and starts going on a journey. Chichikov starts traveling again. He meets more landowners. He meets one in particular who is a very smart man, runs a beautiful estate, and Chichikov wants to be like him and have an estate like him. That's kind of where this book starts going. Chapter 5, it's not even called chapter 5, it just says some chapters later because it's all fragmented. The last chapter of this book, you don't even know what happens. Chichikov, he's going to prison. I'm not even kidding. This story really picks up. I'm like, what happened that Chichikov landed in prison? But it is really interesting to read about his story because overall Chichikov is kind of a scam artist, His motive for buying these dead souls is thinks he could get some sort of payment through taxes. So that's why he does buy the dead souls. He thinks it's profitable. And it's not technically legal. I don't think there are any laws against it, but it's it's a little sketchy. And also in this book, it explains that Chichikov has rebuilt his life so many times You know, his main goal was to be rich, to be this wealthy man. And he had reached wealth several times, and then it has all been taken away from him. So him buying the dead souls is another attempt at becoming wealthy, and it didn't work, and eventually he ends up in prison because of it. Overall, this book is really interesting. I gave it 4 stars, which kind of pained me because Gogol is usually like always a 5-star read for me, but it is very dry in some parts, I will admit. I think this is definitely an interesting story. Gogol is also known for being very funny and satirical. That's one of the main themes in this book and in all of his writings. I also love his descriptions of other people. Yeah, there's one talking about how Chichikov sneezes. The gentleman's manners had something solid about them, and he blew his nose with an exceeding loudness. It is not known how he did it, only his nose sounded like a trumpet. Another one at the beginning of the book. In the corner shop, or better, in its window, sat a seller of hot punch with a red copper samovar, and a face as red as the samovar, so that from a distance one might have thought there were 2 samovars in the window, if one samovar had not had a pitch-black beard. I just love how he describes people and things. I think it's very unique. He also breaks the 4th wall a lot and actually addresses the reader. So I do have an example of this. He says, "It is highly doubtful that readers will like the hero we have chosen." And then again later down the page, "All this is known to the author, yet for all that he cannot take a virtuous man as his hero. But perhaps in this same story, some other as yet untouched strings will be felt." I thought that was really interesting. I haven't seen something like that in Gogol's work before. The thing I like to do is kind of compare and contrast things in Gogol to Dostoevsky, to Tolstoy, to Chekhov, and I am still working through all the Russians. I haven't even hit like a quarter of them probably. That is something I haven't seen in any other Russian book I've read from the 1800s yet, so I thought that was super interesting. But overall, I really like this book, and you know, if you're kind of on the fence about it, I say go read it. Just know it will be dry in some parts. If you like Gogol, you're gonna like this, and I don't know who doesn't like Gogol. He's funny. He's funny, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're inspired to read some Gogol or some Russian literature. Let me know what you're reading now in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.